Good afternoon to our listeners. We're delighted to welcome you to Let's Talk Leadership. Many of our listeners will be more familiar with Friday being our day for having an interview or a discussion. But actually, this is going to be a little bit different. I'm Mason-Powell, and I'm quite often on the panel when we have discussions with a group of leaders about very interesting topics like change, transforming organisations, or indeed you may also have seen some of the discussions with young leaders. We're coaching some young leaders, some pro bono work, and also some interesting topics with leaders, like the interview on compassion with Michael West. But today's a little bit different. We thought, let's think also and talk to some leaders who are leading an approach to developing leaders. This will be another thing for talking about, not just the content. What's our approach for developing leaders? So we thought this was a great opportunity to talk to Marian Timmermans, who's joining us now. Welcome, Marian.
Thank you.
And she has a very long association with transactional analysis. And she wants to talk about what TA is, where it comes from, how it can be used as a really powerful set of tools and techniques for developing leaders. And Marian, similar to myself, she'll introduce herself, but does organizational consulting, coaching, executive coaching with individuals and teams, and also a practice in teaching and propagating the word on transaction analysis. So Marian, perhaps please tell us a little bit about yourself and your interest in TA and where it comes from, and then we'll talk more about some specific areas of TA, I think.
Good. Thanks, Anne. Thank you for asking me to talk about transactional analysis for leaders. Well, I experienced that this is a very valuable model to work with leadership and development and organizational development. And well, let me just tell a bit about what is transactional analysis.
Right.
And in the core, it is the analysis of the transactions between people, and not the financial transactions, but the communicative transactions. And it's it's developed in the 50s and 60s of the last century, America, originally in psychiatry. And the founder of transactional analysis, Berne, you'll find his name anywhere when you start studying TA. He was a psychiatrist, and he said, here we are, doctors, talking difficult words to help people understand what's happening and tell them how to cure. He said, I want a model, I need a model to explain to my patients what's going on so that they themselves can use their thinking and start to cure themselves. The power is in the patient, he said. And well, that's something really different from organizations, but the model in the core is the same that we use. So it's a model on communication, on personality, but also on team work and group work. So you can understand what's going on within me, between you and I, and in the team or in the organization. And TA is famous for some concepts that many people know, like drama triangle, for instance. The word victim behaviour is, many people know that. And that's really from TA. Drama triangle is an inefficient way of communicating. Many people also have heard about parent, adult, child, which are the three ways of, communicating. And this already is an illustration of the simple words that are chosen in TA to explain, difficult processes. And thus TA is a model that kind of simplifies reality and makes it, tangible, and you get options. And we are used to saying the model helps us to simplify, to make it as simple as possible, but not more simple. So it's not, you do acknowledge the complexity of the world that we're in, but the model helps you to, find the core of a problem, for instance, and helps you with easy words to find options to do things differently, if you like.
That's great, isn't it? But perhaps we'll come on to that with some nice examples, because I'm sure there's some great examples that people have even of the victim triangle and that great model since then of the winner's triangle, which perhaps shifts things around. And just thinking about that shift, can you just tell us briefly, because I think our listeners would be interested, how did it move from a sort of maybe dysfunction or pathology, you know, psychiatry? How did it become something that would be a positive tool about development in organizations and individuals? How did that happen?
Yes, we use it now a lot in organizations, in education, in counseling. So not only with people who are having mental problems, but also with people who, well, function normally, if that is a word. But I think it's the practical, comprehensive theory, like I said, easy words for complicated processes, that it's so accessible. So like if you talk with an individual or a team for, half an hour about, for instance, I'm okay, you're okay, which is also a core concept of transactional analysis. If you talk about that and you draw, there are many drawings in TA, like 3 circles, this triangle, the okay corral, which is a quadrant. If you draw the quadrant and then just play with, where do I stand in my normal behavior? Where do I stand under stress? It's so accessible, and it's really, it really helps you find, well, the key issue of a problem. And then it helps you to take a first step, not big, so ever always not lasting, but always helpful. That's not a word. It's not the same solution anytime, but it helps you to find an option for a next step. And I think it's the simplicity. Yeah. But it's simple, but it's not simplicity. And it has so many layers. So it's accessible and not simple. That's what I wanted to say. And it has many layers, and you can dive ever deeper into that, but also with a minimum of explanation, people can really start exploring and understanding, oh, this is how I do it. This is why my attitude towards my employee, this is really plus minus. I make myself a bit bigger, and therefore he or she tends to feel a bit smaller. And then we start a dynamics that's not helpful. So if I can find this I'm okay, you're okay position of talking to you, then things become different.
And maybe you could use that, say, in stakeholder management. I was thinking of a client who struggles to really get lots of buy-in with different levels of stakeholders. And it's not that the stakeholders don't want to be brought in. It's just that sometimes they feel that the way that she does it appears arrogant. It's not intended to. So it comes over to them as, she's okay, we're not okay. And then obviously sometimes a defensive reaction would be, well, I'm going to separate myself then and not be influenced. And that's a nice example, isn't it? I think of the individual and the impact on a group, and then how you could use a model to perhaps explore that and think about some strategies in this case. Yes.
The first step is, and that's really what TA is certainly about, to get into awareness, things that are out of awareness, because this client of yours probably doesn't do it on purpose, but somehow, somewhere in her life, this has become an attitude. And if you can mirror yourself with help of a model that is not judging, then you can start to understand, oh, this is how I do it. Oh, and that might be the right reason why this other person is reacting to me in that way. And of course, you can't change another person, but you can change your own behavior.
Yes, and I think I like the idea how you explain it. I know one of the core principles of TA is, well, people can change, but also that once you're aware, you can put yourself in charge of the change, can't you? Which I think is, for me, is the key thing as well about not seeing it as psychopathology, but seeing it as something like, okay, well, you know, behavior has this kind of impact, and this will take us on to role in a minute, but I need to do this. So what do I need to shift intentionally about what I can do and perhaps have a different impact?
Yes, and it's really amazing, especially with leaders. When we talk about this, they often say, "Oh, this is what I need to do," and then I ask, "Well, how would that sound?" And then they say a sentence, and then I always say plus silence, because silence is so important. If
Yeah.
you, for instance, want to keep a boundary, then you can say, "This is where is my boundary." Period. Not say period, but only say the sentence and not start explaining and explaining and explaining and using many, many words. That's really what's important in TA. You can easily go to the core of something.
That's
And
I
well,
haven't thought about it so much in that way, but I think that's given me something very important to think about. And I wanted to sort of say to the listener, I mean, you're very experienced in this. I started studying TA 20 years ago, but have dipped in and out and I'm very fully committed to it again now. But I remember so powerfully looking at different psychological approaches to personality and understanding oneself and others, and just feeling that TA gave me such good insights into my own life.
yeah.
I
And,
found
and
that was so powerful.
yeah. Well, I came across TA 20 years ago when I started working as a management consultant.
Mm.
And in that firm, the owners were very clear about we do not want our consultants to gossip with the others in the organization. Now, gossiping, you could say, that is drama triangle behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So that is why they were very much aware of that. And every new consultant got a training, 4 days TA. And I immediately was in love because TA, with its simple words, gave words to things I had already known, but had not been able to communicate. And that's really one of the powers of TA, that you have a common language to discuss difficult things.
That's great. Okay, yeah. I really can see that. I'm sure this is going to be really, really something that appeals to the listeners. So I know one of the things you've talked to me a lot about is contracting. That the idea was contracting in relationships was authored by Berne. It was his idea, it was his invention. And also role analysis. I think those are two things that you think are very powerful for organizations. So perhaps if you could share a little bit about the theory and a couple of examples.
Yes, I'd love to. I think it's good to emphasize that working with transactional analysis in organizations is not doing therapy. It's working with normally functioning people in normally functioning organizations. And you don't have to be sick to get better. So that's kind of the thought behind it. And starting from transactional analysis in general, transactional analysis in organization kind of added like two things. One is the person in role. So we think a lot about role. And when we use transactional analysis in organization, we see people as people in role. So not only as personality, but as personality, as role in a context. And that's really important. And the other thing that's really an addition of transactional analysis is when you look at organizations, you look at the collective behavior from a psychological point of view. And well, this famous picture of the iceberg with a part above the surface and part beneath the surface, and the part beneath the surface kind of being more powerful than the part above the surface. You could say this emotional structure of an organization where our likes and dislikes and fears and assumptions. TA has words to communicate about this very powerful part beneath the surface. So it's the psychological way of looking at collective behavior. And what we also do is connect the person to the system as a whole. So it's about a person in role and it's about collective behavior. And well, like you already mentioned, this role is really important.
So have you got an example of where, by using the idea of looking at the person in role, you were able to help someone, as you said earlier, see the root of a problem? So they might bring an issue or a challenge to you, and you then use the concept of role theory to help them
Yeah.
understand what that problem might be?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Let me tell a bit about role theory, and then I'll. Berne Schmid is a German TA professional from the organizational field, and he says in organizations you can better talk about roles than about ego states when it's about communication. So what he developed is an alternative for ego states, and he calls it the role ladder, really a ladder with different spots. And what he says is it's very healthy for a person in role to understand what role he or she is in. And he says, in an organization, I see 3 roles that can conflict, sometimes overlap, or, that people have. The first is the organizational role, which would be, I'm a manager. The second could be a professional role, I'm a teacher. And the third can be a private role. For instance, my neighbor also is my employee. And when we cycle to work together in the morning, then we talk about things happening in the neighborhood. In the Netherlands, we cycle. We talk about things happening in the neighborhood, but in the afternoon, I will be her manager and she will be the employee. And then I really need to be aware of the role I have. So in that example, I have an organizational role and she has an organizational role. And that is why we do this end of year talk together. I evaluate her. And if I'm not aware of my organizational role there, then it's easy to mix the private and the organizational, for instance, and that may bring conflict. Someone I coached gave the example of being really stuck at work. He was a healthcare professional and he had made a promotion. He became a team leader. And there he was in real conflict with the organizational role and the professional role. Because from his profession as a healthcare professional, he had certain ideas and values regarding the work that needed to be done. But as a manager in the same organization, he had to guard organizational values. And they were not always the same, because from this professional point of view, he would say everyone needs I want to give everyone the care they need always. Whereas from an organizational point of view, he had to deal with the fact of budget cuts. So that was really difficult for him. And in unraveling those roles, it was really helpful to say, yes, in this role, this is what I need to do.
How did he feel when he had gone through that process with you? What did he say, or what did you notice?
Relief. Yeah, because it really had been tying
him up.
Tangled. Yeah, it really tied him up, and he did wonder: do I want to be a manager here? What are my personal most important values then, and how can I make the impact in my life that I want to do, in what role? So thinking about role is really important. It diminishes the stress you have if you are clear about that. And if you yourself, for instance, as a manager, as a leader, are clear about your role, then you give an example to others also being clear.
And I can see how you might also then be able to do some work based upon that and identification of the problem, some real sort of important coaching work about what they want to do and how their values are met, and how they, it's about expectations as well, isn't it? And psychologically, what are people expecting of you in a role?
Yes,
and
indeed.
you deliver that. So I could imagine that's hugely important work.
Yeah, and it's also really helpful. Nowadays, many people say as a leader, you need to show your vulnerability. And many leaders I see struggle with that, because they often think that showing vulnerability means I tell everyone about my bad childhood. Whereas if you are, and I don't think that would be a good idea. I do think, though, that it would be a good idea to practice professional intimacy. And that means saying and doing from the role saying and doing the things you need to say and do from the role that you're in. Yeah. It's about courageous conversations, which I noticed you had on your website too. Mm-hmm. So if you're aware of your role, then you can think and decide what to share and what not to share. Mm-hmm. And then it is easier to be vulnerable because you know it's really important to share that part of yourself in this role, but not everything.
So this is the professional intimacy that you're referring to.
Yeah. And I think professional intimacy, to explore a bit more on that, is also that I as a leader do share if I have a bad day, for instance, not just a bad day, but if I enter and I'm really grumpy, like, well, the group we worked with, you and I, recently, we were in the same group and someone shared that. And that is so important that in your role, you can say, okay, I'm a bit grumpy today and it's about something private and I don't need to share it and you don't have to rescue me, but do know that this grumpiness is mine and you don't have to solve it, or it's just where I am today. And I think from a role perspective, that's also for a leader, that part of vulnerability is important because people are sensitive to what leaders express without saying things. And for instance, if a leader is anxious and doesn't own his own anxiety, then it's spread through the organization.
Yes, I think that's very, very important, isn't it? I think that sounds so great. And maybe that's something that we could lead a sort of session on, a practical session at some point on to help people understand it. Is there something, maybe just a couple of minutes, you could tell us about contracts, since that's before we close today?
Yes, and I love that too. I think it's such a powerful concept, and it's really about TA. TA says people can think for themselves. So contracting is making agreements, mutual agreements about day-to-day things, not always legal paperwork, but just day-to-day agreements, like I agree with my husband who will do the cooking today. And then the quality of the agreements you make is really important for the rest and the power of the organization, of people being able to take the space they need. So if you make a mutable contract, I as a leader make a contract with one of my employees, then I can think of 3 layers. First is procedural, and that is about time, money, place. Actually, that's what we often do agree on. But the second level of the contract is the professional. And that already becomes a bit more difficult, like what exactly is the aim? Who will deliver what? What results do we want? And then if I make a contract, either as a leader or as another professional, I need to ask myself, can I deliver in this contract what I need to? And if not, I need to speak up. And then the most exciting part of the contracting is the psychological contract. And that's about things that are out of awareness, expectations, assumptions. And that's what you really need to put on the table, because if you don't do that, then it will hinder you. And people sometimes feel like, oh, that's a tricky place to go, this psychological contract, but actually, you can have fun about it. And it is about assumptions. Like on the days that my husband and I do not agree on who will cook, guess who's making the dinner?
You.
Yeah. So that's a psychological contract. It's the things you don't talk about and the assumptions you have. And we in our work are full with assumptions. And we often don't take the time to make them explicit. And then they're out of awareness of ourselves and of the other. And yet they do play a very important role. I once worked with a team with a lot of conflicts, drama triangle behavior, people losing their energy as soon as they entered the room. And my colleague and I, we started with contracting with them. And that was so powerful. All they did was take like you and I work together, I say to you in 5 minutes, what are my expectations? You say to me in 5 minutes, what are your expectations? And then we see, okay, do they match or don't they match? Mm-hmm. And if they don't, then we talk about it so that we can make an agreement that mm-hmm. we both can say, yes, this is it. And by only making it explicit, the atmosphere completely changed. They talked about before that session and after that session. So it was so powerful in all its simplicity.
And I think, what you're just referring to now is that level of learning that goes beyond just learning something and applying it in a specific situation. It actually enables you to kind of learn a repertoire of skills, doesn't it? That you can apply in different situations. Learn how to learn.
Yeah, learn how to learn. And TA, as a comprehensive theory that is in my mind, it's not an if A then B thing. Mm-hmm. It's not an always be blah, 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 but it's, okay, here I am. What's the contract? Let's just check. Mm-hmm. Oh, I can't find a contract. Oh, that tells me a lot. Let's explore a bit more on that. Or, how are the transactions going? Is it all parent to child? Mm-hmm. Well, no wonder then that this manager says those employees, they really don't take up their role, and that the employees say, I don't get any space from my manager. You can see it in the transactions. So
that's the system you're talking about. It's all interlinked.
Yes. Yeah, there's always a link.
I think that's fantastic, isn't it? And as you get to know TA more and more, you can start to make this. And I can just remember this. So that's what that means. And that's why I'm seeing this. Yeah. And here's the link in so many aspects. It's a kind of comprehensive system. And how great that it's lived on for so long and that it's still getting, particularly in the organisational field that we know, getting more and more people writing new things about it. Isn't that so fast?
Yeah, that's great. That's really great.
I think what you've already shared has given us such a good taster, Marian, to how we can, as coaches and organisational consultants, use this as a system. And I'm thinking we can see what kind of response we're getting to this, and really perhaps take it further and do some other sessions to enable people to really to feel comfortable using this as a set of tools to inform their practice.
I'd love to.
What do you think, Marian, about that?
I would love to. Well, I think, my aim in life, that's a bit huge to say that, but help people make impact. And that, in TA is such a great resource for that, for better understanding of self, of you and I, and of, the team, the organization as a whole.
System working, whether it's our personal system or our family system or our organisation. Marian, that's just so informative and great examples, and definitely feel your enthusiasm, which I'm sure we'll be catching. So thank you so much for your time, and we will let our listeners know what else we have up our sleeve for the future on TA.
It was a real pleasure, and thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.